Cedar apple rust can be a fairly devastating disease, and we're going to spend a little time talking about its life cycle and how you can better manage it in your landscape. Particularly with cedar apple rust, we'll see the galls that are most obvious on the juniper trees this time of year. On any of the cedars, this happens to be a Taylor juniper that we're looking at, which is quite susceptible, but any of the cedar species pretty much will see the cedar apple rust at that stage. Now this fungus has a very unique life cycle in that it starts out on the cedar tree. At this point, these galls start, and as moisture occurs and it warms up in the spring, those galls will develop these large teleal horns that are large masses that you'll see on the cedar trees, and those release the spores that will then go over and infect our apple trees in the landscape. So particularly if you have both cedars and apples, that's where you'll be really prone to have a lot of cedar apple rust. And this can be really a proximity issue and also wind direction. So if you have cedar species that are in close proximity to apples, and particularly upwind of predominant winds in the spring, then you're going to tend to see more galling and infection on those cedars. Now as those spores go over and affect the apple, on the apple tree itself, that's a time where we can really manage this easier, because there are many fungicides available that you can use to protect that apple tree from infection from the cedars. So here, as we see those galls start to emerge and we see those teleal horns form, that's an indicator to you that it's time to start your protection on that apple tree, and even actually a little bit before that if you can. So as our apple trees are starting to flower, we're starting to get those leaves starting to emerge, and we see those galls on that cedar, that's when it's time to use that fungicide. Now there are definitely other diseases that if you're using a good fruit tree spray program, you're going to manage as well, because by now you've already maybe put that application on for scab, which many of our apple species are susceptible to. So if you've got your apple leaves protected though, you're going to do a lot for management. Now the other thing that you can do is you can, if you just have a few galls, remove those cedar apple rust galls. That's going to remove that inoculum source, and this is one of the only diseases in our landscape that you can really see it very evident where it's coming from, so you can remove that and reduce that inoculum. And then when it goes over to the apple, you make your fungicide applications. And then the other thing that you can do is you can watch that apple tree itself, and as those places of infection continue to develop, and on the underside of the leaf you'll see those spores release and those points where they become rough. As that comes a little bit later in the season, then at that window you could actually use some fungicides to protect the cedar tree itself. So this is a neat fungal disease that occurs in our landscapes. It's quite common. It can be really devastating, but if you know the cycle that you're working with, you could easily manage cedar apple rust.